He's Commissioner of Education Jason Glass has announced he is resigning at the end of September. He still has 1 year left on his contract, but exercised a clause to give 60 days notice.
WKYT's Kelsey Soto shares why he's stepping down and what led to the decision.
I do not wish to be part of implementing the dangerous and unconstitutional anti-LGBTQI law that the legislature passed this last session, so it is time for me to move on.
Emotional yet simple. Jason Glass says the decision to leave his post after 3 years can be boiled down to politics. Senate Bill 150 became the straw that broke the camel's back.
I think that was, in addition to the change in the confirmation procedure for future commissioners of education.
This third-generation Kentucky educator who began his career teaching social studies in Hazard says he is proud of the work they've accomplished, including overcoming a pandemic and 2 natural disasters.
Even in those school communities that lost school buildings, they had other facilities that could be turned into temporary shelters or distribution hubs or medical centers or places where people could get basic needs. And we saw the educators step up when the community was in crisis. And that's what we do. That's what educators always do.
He tells us his next post will be fulfilling a lifelong dream of working in higher education as the Associate VP of Teaching and Learning at Western Michigan University.
I want to express my heartfelt appreciation to the students in Kentucky. I've met so many of them, and that's maybe been the best part of this job.
While he says this isn't the way he wanted to end his time in the Commonwealth, he recognizes that the role of educator is becoming increasingly more important.
They don't hear it enough, the folks working in our schools, so I'll say it again. Thank you.
In Frankfort, Kelsey Soto, WKYT.
The Kentucky Board of Education will be holding a special meeting in mid-August to determine the next steps and a timeline for moving forward.